Hey folks, how is it going? We are back with another video. I've been away for a short time due to health reasons, but I wanted to start with this verse here in Revelation 17, where you see the end is approaching. I believe there's only 10 years left, and there's a plan by the global elite, what are called the global elite. It's not a globe, it's a flat Earth, but the term globalist was sort of given to these people who like to unite all these nations together. We have the United Nations, we have continental confederacies such as the European Union, and these confederacies sit above the democratic sovereign nations and basically suck up all the laws within to this unelected bureaucracy. And as far as Europe's concerned, which seems to have the brunt of the problems, because it seems to be that Europe has been, since the Greeks at least, the dominant continental power, although a lot of it's credited to America recently. But Europe, really, with the Greeks and the Romans, are the dominant force. So by overturning a lot of the events of history of the last 400 years, the Roman Catholic harlot wishes to re-establish itself. Okay, so if we look at Revelation 17, we're given this vision that the prostitute, who is the Roman Catholic Church, will be hated by the 10 horns and the beast, as it says. So we have these allegories of church and state. So the church is the prostitute, the state is the beast. The prostitute rides on top of the beast, but the beast says they will leave her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by uniting to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Okay, Rome. Interesting here, this little sentence, the purpose is going to be carried out by being put into the hearts by God. So the beast is going to have it put into his heart to carry out the purpose by uniting to give their kingdoms together, to put their kingdoms together until the words of God are fulfilled. The words of God being that this prophecy is going to come to pass, and that the prostitute is going to be judged and the beast is going to do it. And then we're going to look in this video at the reasons why and how this is happening, how it's manifesting itself within this time that we're living through. So Antichrist, i.e. the Church of Rome, it had all these bowls of wrath poured out upon it. If we look in the previous chapter, with the law of you reap what you sow, we can see that Rome, that city, and the prostitute was reaping what she was sowing, because we see that we have this bowl here. Second angel pours the bowl out on the sea. Third angel pours the bowl onto the rivers, and they turn to blood. And so if we look at this in an allegorical way, it was that the 300 years of persecution that the Romans brought upon the churches of Christ, they were paid back with their own blood, because as we see here in this 6th verse, they spilt the blood of the saints and prophets, so you've given them blood to drink as they deserve it. So Islam was raised up, and Islam came as an enemy against the Romans, and for something like 1,000 years they were sworn enemies of the Roman Catholic Church and the territories that they occupied. And so we go down now into the fifth angel, and the sixth angel is very interesting. I've given exegesis on that about the Protestant Reformation, and then the unclean spirits that go out, as it says here. These are the Jesuits. They go out and they unite these nations, as we looked in 17. Okay. The United Nations, the European Union. And so the time that we've lived through, these confederacies have gained more and more power and used the freedoms, and they're seemingly bringing all that power back to the Roman Catholic Church that they lost.
Yesterday afternoon outside.
So this is an incident that took place in Ireland.
3 children were stabbed. One of them, a 5-year-old girl, was critically injured. 2 adults are also still in hospital.
So what happened is there was a stabbing in Ireland, and the criminal who committed the crime was an Algerian migrant. Apparently, he'd been arrested in 2003 but released, and he's stabbed 3 children, 2 adults. And there was a riot following this, and we're going to play how the government has responded to what happened.
The incident likely a catalyst for the rioting. Very quickly, online, far-right leaders ramped up the rhetoric, describing the attacker as a foreigner, blaming immigration.
So if they say far right, just like you've had Milei in Argentina, and in the Netherlands you have, again, they're saying far right. It means somebody who's against cultural Marxism and the New World Order, somebody who's a conservative who wants to preserve sovereign nationality, whereas this Antichrist with the cultural Marxism, this communism, wants to dilute everything to do with nations.
In fact, the Gardaí, the Irish police service, has issued very little detail. In a press release, it says the person of interest in this case is a man in his 50s and that he hasn't been arrested.
In addition to that, I think it's now very obvious to anyone who might have doubted it that our incitement hatred legislation is just not up to date. It's not up to date for the social media age, and we need that legislation through, and we need it through within a matter of weeks, because it's not just the platforms who have a responsibility here, and they do. There's also the individuals who post messages and images online that stir up hatred and violence.
So the problem here is not that they've let in foreigners who have nothing in common with that nation, have no historical ties, zero. They're letting people in unvetted who can be schizophrenics, who can attack people, and then when this news surfaces, then they're fearful that the population, the indigenous population of that particular nation, that they are bringing in these migrants to dilute and water down the nationalism of that nation. They then start panicking and saying that these are all hate crimes, and the real problem is the indigenous people. In this case, they're white Irish. There's too many white Irish, and they're the problem stirring up hatred online. We need to bring in censorship measures, etc. This is basically how left-hard socialists operate.
And we need to be able to use laws to go after them individually as well.
Amidst the rumours, one thing's for sure. Last night, Dublin burned. Rage clearly directed at the police, looting.
So, this is wrong to do such things. These are crimes. But what seems to be happening is that the population has no trust in the government. It's basically a case of team government versus team people. Team government wants to destroy the indigenous people by bringing in migrants and taking away laws and freedoms, so the people don't feel like they're represented and go on the rampage.
On the surface, an archetypal riot.
Is it just me, or does it seem like they're more upset about why the people were rioting than they are about the actual riots themselves? And secondly, these rioters are amateurs. Obviously, they have not taken any rioting 101 classes at Cal Berkeley. Rule number one of rioting: if you don't want to get arrested, scream Black Lives Matters. Rule number two: wave a Palestinian flag and you might get arrested, but you won't get charged. You see, oppressed people are allowed to burn cities to the ground. I mean, don't these people in Ireland even watch the news? It's amateur hour over there.
One thing I strongly agree with the deputy on is the need to set a target to have a number of people from ethnic minorities in areas of the public service. We have a health service that's very diverse, although less so as you go up towards the senior positions, not so much in the Gardaí, not so much in the Defence Forces, not so much in the education sector, as the deputy mentioned, not at all in the civil service, which is very white, including the Department of Equality, for example.
It would be very white because, I mean, you know, what happened was when Noah and his sons came off the boat, the nations were divided, and Ham took the southern lands, and Japheth took the northern lands, and there we have the families that came out of the boat.
And that actually needs to change. So we need to have, I think, a target for people who come from ethnic minority backgrounds, but also dedicated recruitment campaigns to encourage people, because we do need a generation of young people growing up in Ireland who are people of colour to see black and brown school principals, judges.
Boy, is this guy based.
So, you know, what the narrator of this video was touching on was cultural Marxism, because he was saying you can get away with rioting if you're waving and shouting about Black Lives Matter. So if we look at cultural Marxism, which was the strategy employed in order to take over the nations of Europe, because if you look around the world, they're not doing it to any of the other continents particularly. They're doing it to North America slowly, in as much as they can do. So if we look at cultural Marxism in Frankfurt School, it's quite important to understand the strategy that was employed. If you don't understand this strategy, none of this is going to make much sense. We need to address the concept of cultural Marxism according to this write-up. It's a Marxist plan to undermine Western society and bring in a Marxist utopia. So, you know, if you look into Karl Marx's ideas, it was about the destruction of the family. They don't believe in private property. It's basically completely evil, devilish plan, and one that fits in very well with returning the world to Dark Age slavery that the Roman Catholic Church prefers to preside over. According to this theory, the strategy originates with Antonio Gramsci, a neo-Marxist philosopher and founding member of the Italian Communist Party. Marx argued that the owners of the means of production maintain their position primarily through political and economic force, through other elements in society, such as religion, though other elements in society contributed to their control. Gramsci expanded on this idea, arguing that the bourgeoisie maintain power primarily through their cultural hegemony, that is, their control over all facets of the culture and the promulgation of their values. So if you don't know what the bourgeoisie is, you're talking middle class. So when Lenin, a lot of people mistake Lenin for being Russian, who's German. So, you know, a lot of the power base within the beast is Germany. That's the clay, because the clay mixes with the iron. And so Lenin, also Marx was German, but Lenin gets sent to Russia. They want to overthrow that country, and he sets about stirring up the working class against the middle class. So the working class, in communistic terms, is referred to as the proletariat, and he basically looks for triggers as to how he can get them on side and turn them against their middle class, the bourgeoisie, bosses, basically, you know. And so you're oppressed, you're not paid very much, you've got too many hours of work, your conditions of work are bad, etc. And this is how these communists go in and infiltrate, create an insurrection in those nations and overthrow those nations from within. But in the case of cultural Marxism, they didn't go to the working class. They went to groups who were oppressed under the Christian leadership, because when it uses the phrase hegemony, to see here, hegemony is meaning leadership. The leadership. So in this case, the leadership of the middle class were controlling the facets of the culture. So if you're going and creating a culture war, you want to win that culture war, you've got to go in with a different hegemony to rival the middle class hegemony, is basically what this article is going to deal with. In effect, the workers have adopted bourgeois values as their own. Okay, so your average man who's got to do a 5 or 6 day working week has the same values as the bosses who are paying them, is what it's saying. But according to the communists, they're counter to their own interests, because they want to say that the boss is like this capitalistic fat cat, who's making all this money off your sweat, kind of thing. For change to happen in society, the working class needs to develop its own culture based on self-interest. To do this, it needs to form alliances and compromises with other groups. So this is where cultural Marxism starts to take its own shape. The ideology it develops must extend well beyond narrow economic interests and address moral and spiritual needs of people. Only when it develops such a counter-hegemony, a counter-leadership that can challenge and ultimately replace the cultural hegemony of the bourgeoisie will the communist revolution succeed. Okay, here's quite an interesting point. They have this view that truth is a social construct. Completely false. The bottom line here, that for social progress and liberation of the worker to occur, the current culture and value system must be attacked and replaced with a new one that reflects the interests of workers and, more broadly, the oppressed. Establishing this new truth is critical to human liberation. It does fit well within the trends we saw. So the libtards are on the offensive now. They've got their strategy. They're being recruited in the universities. They're going to the mosques. They're going to the gay bars. They're going to the student union, feminist meeting, and they're going to the minorities, the minority clubs. They're going there radicalizing. They're going to get the groups together. They're going to piece them together. So cultural Marxism refers to a theory that sees most of the anti-traditional cultural movements today as being rooted in a systematic Marxist plan to undermine Western society, to bring in a Marxist utopia, basically to destroy you. So there's nothing left. Okay, then we go into Frankfurt School, which was where cultural Marxism was created. Let me just skip through so that it doesn't take all day. So the working classes have bought into the capitalist system, which provides them with goods they pursue. If social changes to occur, Marcuse argued, it would have to come from an alliance of radical intellectuals with the marginalized ethnic minorities not integrated into the system, the unemployed, etc. He argued in these conditions democracies could become totalitarian, while in general he supported the idea of free speech. He argued that in a totalitarian democracy it could be dangerous. If someone had someone withdrawn the rights of free speech from Hitler, for example, it could have prevented Auschwitz and a world war. Toleration then had limits, as he put it. Liberating tolerance then would mean intolerance against movements from the right and toleration of movements from the left. So if we think about going back to this idea of uniting. If you remember 2013, Antichrist, Pope Francis, one of the first things he did was he did this uniting video of all these religions, all these so-called faiths coming together under one and uniting, saying we believe in love. And so it's been this thing ever since about evangelizing that doctrines don't matter. It's all about uniting under this umbrella of love. So we have this title here: Pope Francis orders white women to breed with Muslims. This was from 2018. Apparently this didn't happen according to all the government false information websites. So Pope Francis compared Christ to the leader of an Islamic terrorist death cult and suggested Christian missionaries have a lot in common with members of ISIS during a wide-ranging, shocking interview, in which he also openly promoted socialism and ordered European women to breed with Muslim migrants in order to counter declining birth rates, which they created. Today, because they destroyed the family under Marxism. See, this is how you do it. Today, I don't think there is a fear of Islam as such, but of ISIS and its war of conquest, which is partly drawn from Islam, he told French newspaper La Croix. It is true that the idea of conquest is inherent in the soul of Islam. However, it is also possible to interpret the objective in Matthew's Gospel, where Jesus sends his disciples to all nations in terms of the same idea of conquest. This is how Antichrist operates. He's a deceiver. He's always trying to create this parallel between light and dark. If you look at he's basically said, yes, Islam is a conquesting religion, but also so is Christianity. That's what he's saying in this paragraph. Now, how do you want to wing that? Because in the first instance, we know that Islam went and hacked and slew people and drew blood. But did Jesus send the apostles out to do that? So you can't make any kind of comparison between the two. What a lot of unlearned people say is that the Christianity did the same because of the Crusades, for example, but they don't understand that that was the Antichrist. You know, Roman Catholic Antichrist was doing the Crusades. Pope also admitted he does not enjoy learning about European history, and he dreads hearing about the Christian roots of Europe, because in his opinion, the history of Europe has colonialist overtones. It was at this point in the interview that Pope Francis called on European women to integrate Muslim migrants into their populations by breeding with them and countering the declining birth rate that he blames on the selfishness of white people. See, so we got to tie in all these different facets of prophecy, implementation of the mechanisms that are going to bring about fulfillments of prophecy, the Antichrist, how he's going to make war on those nations that he became disempowered within, such as mainly Northern Europe. We're talking England in particular. This integration is all the more necessary today, since as a result of selfish search for well-being, well, I mean, he's sitting on top of trillions while everybody else is under his heel, you know, trying to just keep their head above water, trying to feed their families, you know, paying these massive amounts of inflation. You know, they put all the basics through the roof, like housing and food. You know, things have never been worse since people were forced into these confederacies such as the European Union. I mean, everything went through the roof. It was deliberate inflation. Pope Francis's opinions are disturbingly similar to those of top Imam Sheikh Mohammed Ayed, who says Muslims should exploit the Muslim crisis to breed with Europeans and conquer their countries. Conquer their countries. Who should? oh yeah, they're friends. They're best friends now because it's like I read this stuff that with the Spanish Civil War, it was like the Spanish didn't want to live under Roman Catholic tyranny, and they wanted to kick the Roman Catholic Church out of Spain. And so, who did the Muslims go to try and help them restore order? It was the Muslims. They sent Muslims into the Canary Islands, is what I read. Which you won't ever hear much about this stuff. Roman Catholic Church always seems to sponsor terrorism. Europe has become old and decrepit and needs human reinforcement. They are not motivated by compassion for the Levant, its people and its refugees. Soon we will trample them underfoot, Allah willing, he stated. Throughout Europe, all the hearts are enthused with hatred towards Muslims. They wish that we were dead, but they have lost their fertility. So they look for fertility in our midst. We will give them fertility. We will breed children with them because we shall conquer their countries. And whilst this plan's underway to destroy white Anglo-Saxon Protestants in particular, WASPs, they're just going to go through the whole of Europe with this because all the kings have united, like we were saying here. These nations are being destroyed. But what's going to happen? There's going to be this, like it seems to me, like what's manifesting, because I believe there's only 10 years left, what seems to be manifesting is a fermentation of hatred that's being caused by this implementation of denationalization. It's denationalization and deindustrialization under these false ideologies that were concocted by the Club of Rome and written in the 1991 book called The First Global Revolution, where they said we've all made these treaties so we don't war against each other anymore, so we need a new threat to make people afraid. We'll have these new threats such as global warming, and diseases, and these are going to be the new threats that we'll destroy people with because the enemy is mankind itself. So, am I wrong? Of course I'm not. If we look at the censorship tells us as well about constantly covering up any kind of, if you research it, you can always see that they've covered it all up. You type in, like I did, because I remember he said this. I remember he said this from 2018. I've put the poop. I didn't really actually mean to say that, but it kind of fits, doesn't it? The poop. Snopes, that's such a reliable fact-checking site. Thank you, fact-checker. Did Pope Francis order white women to breed with Muslims? Tell me, Snopes, tell me. Rating, false. The fake news website you can trust from your government. Not real news. Pope didn't order women to breed with Muslims. They're loaded at the top of the site, search. Loaded at the top of the search. Pinned. They're just pinned right there just for your information, you researchers. That Algerian migrant who stabbed that family. The real crime is you people on the internet searching all this stuff up is the real crime, you haters. Not real news. Pope didn't order women to breed with Muslims. Is that the third one? The Pope has not ordered white women to breed with Muslims. He never said that.